A car dealership was entered by two black adolescents, with nothing but reverence and enthusiasm. After a few minutes, they were expelled for appearing to be disruptive. Their billionaire father arrived the following day, not to shout, but to ensure that the entire world is aware, observed the actual events. There was a heavy sun over Tempe that afternoon. A day in Arizona that is characterized by its sluggish pace and aridity, where the concrete vibrates with heat. Malik Townsend had recently completed his track practice. His grey t-shirt was affixed to his back, while walking alongside his sibling, Ayana, across the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery. They were not present to incite violence. Malik had been discussing this visit for the entirety of the week. "I am not implying that I will acquire a vehicle today," he stated, adjusting the strap of his exercise bag. "Nevertheless, I am interested in observing their capabilities, perhaps something that has been previously used. I would like to obtain a notion prior to my birthday." Ayana's tresses were flipped over her shoulder as she chuckled. "Do you truly believe that Dad will allow you to drive yourself to school? In a two-door coupe? Come on," he said with a smile. However, his pace did not decelerate. "Allow me to dream." Quietness prevailed on the dealership property. Under sun-faded flags, sleek silver sedans were arrayed. Glass doors glowed in the sunlight, and the two entered the building in the manner of any other pair of children, with a few inquiries and wide-eyed. The air conditioning was extremely effective within the premises, cutting through the external warmth. A middle-aged male wearing a pale blue dress shirt. From behind a counter, he raised his head. Malik was the initial object of his attention, and he then turned his attention to Ayana. They were impeccably attired. Malik in athletic attire. Ayana is depicted in sandals and a straightforward dress. Absolutely nothing extraordinary. I did not hear anything startling. Nevertheless, the individual promptly rose from his seat. "Is it possible for me to assist you?" he was heard with a hurried voice. Malik, who was consistently courteous, advanced. "Yes, I am simply inspecting a few vehicles. Some individuals may be in search of used items. My birthday is approaching." And the man interrupted. "Do you have an appointment?" He was already making his way toward them. Malik hesitated. "No, we simply," he interrupted. "Unsupervised minors are prohibited from entering the showroom." Quickly glancing across the room at a colleague. "Company policy." Ayana's expression altered. "Nothing is being touched. However, this is not a destination for socializing." His demeanor had become increasingly icy. "If you are interested, you may now review the website." The silence that ensued was oppressive. Malik uttered a word. Afterward, it was once again closed. The strap of her bag was firmly curled by Ayana's fingers. Malik said quietly, "We will depart." And they did. There is to be no shouting. Do not resist. The return journey across the pavement was a leisurely one. Ayana maintained her respiration throughout the duration. She waited until they were in the rear seat of the Uber, prior to her speaking. "That individual treated us as if we were insignificant." Malik scarcely nodded once. His mandible was clenched. He touched the screen of his phone, checked the duration of the journey, gazed out the window. Ayana observed her brother's reflection in the glass. She was dissatisfied with his subsequent silence. Initially, he was not a person who was particularly vocal. However, this was distinct. Silence was not present. It was a demonstration of self-control. She had previously observed that expression on their father's visage. "You are not going to inform Dad, are you?" He did not respond immediately. "Malik," he ultimately replied, "I am uncertain. I am at a loss as to what to call it." It is not as though the individual made any outrageous statements. He simply did not wish for us to be present. Ayana reclined. "It appeared to be an absurdity to me." Neither of them spoke for the remainder of the journey. They were not obligated to. They were both aware of the events that had transpired. However, the individual at the dealership was unaware of this, whom he had recently evicted. Additionally, by the following morning, he intended to ascertain the matter. The Uber wound its way through the slopes of Paradise Valley, and the homes became larger and quieter, and their dispersion increased as they proceeded upward. The black SUV's tinted windows. Ayana continued to fume as she sat with her arms crossed. Malik maintained his silence, holding his phone with his hand and turning off the screen. He was preoccupied with other matters. Their residence was visible, a contemporary residence constructed of stone and white concealed behind a covert gate. Inconspicuous, however, It is costly in that regard. Old money, or extremely intelligent money, is the only ones who ever look. Charles Townsend, their father, had constructed his technological empire from scratch, commencing with hardware restorations in Flagstaff, before striking gold with a data security venture. Currently, his name is frequently invoked by individuals, in Silicon Valley panels and Forbes articles. However, in this region, he was simply known as Charles. The children entered through the side entrance, and placed their belongings on the bench adjacent to the kitchen. The residence emanated a faint aroma of clean linens and cedar, a scent of home. Mrs. K, their housekeeper, looked up from the dining table, where she was arranging towels. "Hello everyone. How is everything going?" Ayana murmured. "Yes." Malik declined to respond. Their father's voice emanated from the opposite end of the hallway. "Malik." Just seconds later, he emerged from the hallway. He remains barefoot, and attired in a navy polo shirt, holding a device. "You have arrived early." A gesture was given by Malik. "I was unable to remain for an extended period." Charles immediately observed the sag in his son's shoulders. How he avoided making eye contact. He briefly observed Ayana. Her expression conveyed more than she likely intended. What transpired? Malik maintained his silence. After placing the device down, Charles folded his arms. "Malik." Ayana let out an exhale. "We were denied entry by an individual at the dealership." Charles's expression was unhappy. "Which dealership?" "Madison Auto Gallery, is situated off University Drive." "Exactly what did he say?" Malik massaged the back of his neck. "Did not wish for us to observe. Said that minors are not permitted to enter without a parent. Alleged that we were socializing." Charles remained motionless for an extended period of time. A minor contraction of his pupils occurred. Not in a state of rage, however, with a particular emphasis. Those meticulous slow calculations, that implied that he was considering 2 or 3 steps in advance. "What actions did you take?" Malik stated. "We departed. I was hesitant to incite a disturbance. That struck with force." Charles exhaled, entered the kitchen and dispensed a glass of water. Before resuming his conversation, he presented it to Malik. "You made the correct decision. Do you understand?" Malik blinked once. Then his father sat down on the counter perch, and gazed directly at him. "I would like you to comprehend a concept. You are not inferior to any other individual. I am indifferent to whether you arrive in athletic attire, or a tuxedo. You maintain an appropriate demeanor, and if an individual elects to perceive you as an issue, that is their responsibility, not yours." Ayana observed as she reclined against the refrigerator. Charles maintained an even and subdued voice as he continued. "However, it is also important to be aware of this. It is not always the case that silence confers fortitude. Sometimes you permit individuals to get away with minor infractions. They persist in performing them. To the subsequent individual, subsequently the following." Malik made a forceful intake. Charles did not respond immediately. He gazed at both of them, before rising and retrieving his phone from his pocket. "I intend to engage in a dialogue." Ayana blinks. "With whom?" He exited the room, stating, "With whoever is in charge of that establishment." The following morning, the following hours were characterized by an unusual sense of stillness. No one's voice was elevated. Absence of urgent telephone messages. Charles prepared his typical entree of grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. The family dined together. However, there was a change in the atmosphere. The emotion was not anger, there was a purpose. Malik gazed at the ceiling for an extended period of time. That evening, before succumbing to slumber, he was uncertain as to what his father intended by a conversation. However, he had a premonition that the volume would be greater than any outcry that had ever been heard. Additionally, across the city, the individual at the dealership was unaware that a tempest was imminent. Madison Auto Gallery commenced operations at 9 a.m. acute. The staff had already begun to arrive at 8:45, with their keys jingling, coffee cups in hand, and spectacles still on. The customary Monday cadence. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, reclined against the front desk while enjoying an iced Americano and perusing his phone. He was no longer able to identify half of the names in his inbox. The rate of turnover was considerable. If you were proficient in sales, The position was lucrative. He was also adept at selling. One consumer was present in the lot by 9:03, a Rolls-Royce Phantom in navy blue, glistening in the Arizona sun. It did not retract into a conventional location. It did not remain stationary in the rear. It halted immediately upon reaching the front entrance. Initially, no one was able to exit. Derek briefly observed the receptionist before proceeding to circumvent the desk. "Are you anticipating an appointment?" "No," she replied, her gaze fixed on the automobile. The door then swung open. A tall individual in a dark blazer emerged. The slacks are so sharp that they can pierce glass. Shoes that have been polished to shine like a mirror. Slowly, he advanced. In a composed manner. There are no unnecessary procedures. After pushing the glass door open, he remained at the entrance for a single instant. "Good morning," he said, his voice silky yet firm. "I am in search of your manager." Derek hesitated. "I am the assistant manager. What can I assist you with?" The man gazed intently at him. "You are not the individual I require." Kyle Lenson, the general manager, emerged from the side office at that moment. Tall, red-faced, consistently exhibiting an excessive level of anxiety. "Morning," he replied abruptly. "My name is Kyle. May I inquire as to what has brought you here?" The individual reached into his jacket pocket and presented him with a card. Kyle read the name slowly. Charles Townsend, chairman and founder of TNS Global. His complexion began to deteriorate as he gazed upward. Wow sir, I wasn't expecting," Charles replied. "I would have thought that you were not." He then proceeded to enter the building. "I will not consume a significant amount of your time." Kyle pointed to his office, his gaze diverting to Derek. "Permit us to converse in this area." However, Charles refrained from proceeding. "I will only be able to speak for a few minutes." Kyle nodded stiffly, obviously uncomfortable. "Of course, go ahead." Charles glanced around the showroom. "Yesterday 2 teenagers walked in here. One was my son, the other my daughter." Kyle blinked. His larynx bobbed. "They were told they weren't permitted to browse, that they should depart, that this place wasn't for them." "Sir, we have." Charles held up a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I'm not here for a refund. Yesterday I did not incur any losses. However, you succeeded. You missed the opportunity to treat 2 young individuals with respect, who were raised to do so, even if it is not returned." A few additional employees had begun to approach, feigning to clean counters or arrange documents. Charles proceeded. "My children are not disruptive. They are intelligent and considerate, nurtured with tenderness. Additionally, they are not in need of your endorsement. However, they should have been regarded as individuals, not comparable to threatening." Derek gazed downward at his footwear. The receptionist had ceased typing altogether. Kyle cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, if I may," Charles stated, "I am not seeking an apology. Apologies are effortless. What truly matters is your convictions when no one is present. What decisions do you make when you believe no one is going to challenge you?" He hesitated. "Allow the silence to exist. Because my children will not be involved in the future. It may be an individual who lacks a father with a media contact list. Additionally, they will depart with a memory that you will never hear about. However, it will remain in their memory for the duration of their existence." Subsequently, he turned to depart. However, just prior to opening the door, he added, without glancing back, the following: "It is possible to market luxury without being diminutive. I trust that you will be able to determine how." Externally, a small group had assembled, consisting of 2 individuals who were recording the event on their mobile devices. A woman holding a microphone, and a local reporter on a tip. Charles had not contacted them. The news had recently spread. The atmosphere outside had undergone a transformation, not in climate, but in weight. Charles descended onto the dealership pavement with a deliberate and composed demeanor. The small throng that was forming did not cause his expression to change. 2 college students from the area stood to the side, their phones in hand, quietly conversing in a murmur. A woman from KXME 5 News was already in the middle of a sentence, murmuring into her microphone, uncertain as to whether she was currently live. Charles refrained from raising his voice. He did not search for a podium. He abruptly halted in the vicinity of the entrance. He adjusted the sleeve of his jacket and conversed. "I had no intention of expressing myself today. However, I am aware of the mechanics of this. If I refrain from expressing it at this time, someone else will attempt to represent me. He raised his head, examining the few faces that were gazing back. My daughter Ayana, and my son Malik yesterday afternoon. I arrived at this location. They were not boisterous. They were not engaging in any form of mischief. They arrived in order to resemble any other youthful person. A slight sense of anticipation in their abdomen, and a vision in their mind. His voice remained unwavering. The volume was not excessive. It was so silent that it caused individuals to lean in. Nevertheless, they were requested to vacate the premises. Not because they violated a regulation. It was not due to the fact that they caressed an item that was not intended for them. However, due to a decision made by an individual, they were not intended to be in this location. That they were a problem prior to uttering a single syllable. The college student who is clutching the phone released a gentle breath, his voice trembling with emotion. Charles continued, "Throughout my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the construction of something that would endure. Subsequently, I have instructed my offspring that what one constructs does not remain in your bank account indefinitely. It manifests itself in your interpersonal interactions, in the context of daily decisions, the ones you create when no one is watching." Yet again, he hesitated. Not suitable for dramatic purposes, however, due to the significance of the subsequent statements. My children were observed by an individual yesterday, and were unable to discern their identities. They observed the individuals they believed to be. Additionally, they disregarded them. You are not required to elevate your voice in order to be disrespectful. It is sufficient to induce feelings of inferiority in an individual within a specific environment. They were enthusiastic about entering. Kyle observed the scene from behind the glass doors. His hands were deeply buried in his pockets. Charles momentarily glanced over his shoulder. Afterward, he returned his attention to the individuals in front of him. I am not requesting that anyone cancel this location. I do not subscribe to that notion. I am no longer even irritated. I am simply weary of this pattern. Repeatedly, good children are being treated as criminals. Before they have committed any wrongdoing, things of this nature tend to endure. Additionally, in the event that no one addresses the matter, it continues to transpire. A few additional bystanders had halted on the sidewalk. A delivery person who is located across the street lowered his spectacles to obtain a more comprehensive view. I arrived today, due to the fact that my offspring did not merit such treatment. Additionally, I desire for them to observe that when an error occurs, you do not simply consume it, you confront it with a sense of clarity, with respect, and without allowing it to transform you into the very thing you are opposing. He took a step back in the direction of the Rolls-Royce, the door handle with one's palm. One additional item. Yesterday, my children exited the house with their heads held high. That expresses their entire character, and nothing about the individual who attempted to reduce them. He entered the vehicle, without speaking a word after opening the door. Cheering was absent from the audience. No one applauded. They remained where they were, assimilating the information they had acquired, what they had observed, and its commentary on all other matters. Derek gradually seated down within the dealership. There were tears in the receptionist's eyes, and was unaware of the reason. Kyle Lenson maintained his position at the window. His arms remained erect at his side. However, he was aware that it was too late to manage the narrative at this point. The initial video was posted on Twitter by the afternoon. Afterward, Instagram was implemented. Then, the news. The narrative gradually assumed a life of its own. The narrative had been disseminated beyond the local community by midday. What originated as a vertical phone video that was unsteady, recorded by a college undergraduate named Tori Clemens, had already exceeded 2 million views on X. The caption was as follows: "This individual has recently entered a dealership that disregarded his children and managed it with such elegance. Actually, I am rendered speechless." Individuals were not merely disseminating the video, they were dissecting it, frame freezing, reducing the distance, a tone of debate, arguing in threads. A woman from Flagstaff commented on a single post. "In 2001, Charles Townsend repaired my father's laptop and would not accept a cent. That individual has been constructed in a manner that is distinct from the norm." Others were less benevolent. A comment was made by an anonymous account with a profile picture of an eagle. Why did the children not simply disclose their father's identity? There is a suggestion that they intended to portray themselves as victims. With that, snowballed. It was discussed on morning talk programs. Phoenix's Good Morning aired a segment entitled Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership is accused by billionaire father. The dealership's Yelp rating was significantly improved within hours, decreased from 4.2 to 2.1. Numerous one-star evaluations emerged in a similar manner to Weeds. A staff that is rude and dismissive, treated my adolescent son with the same level of severity as a criminal. I will never return. If you are not dressed in a suit and tie, please refrain from entering. They will request that you depart prior to your utterance. Certainly, not all of the backlash was directed at strangers. The story was also the subject of discussion among local activist organizations, encouraging discussions regarding the perception of youth and the bias that is present in ordinary life. In the midst of it all, the dealership issued a statement, a tepid 2-paragraph contrition, posted on their Instagram page and website. We are sorry for the recent incident that occurred at our showroom, and are currently conducting an ongoing evaluation of our policies. We endeavor to establish a warm and inviting atmosphere for all visitors. These matters are to be taken seriously. Everything was indicated in the comments that followed. You are only apologizing because you were apprehended. Are you reviewing the policies? Would you like to evaluate your employees? This apology is as warm as a parking ticket. In the background, Kyle Lenson was in a state of panic. He had already contacted 2 public relations consultants. Both individuals conveyed the same information to him. Speak with fewer words. Maintain a minimal profile. Additionally, refrain from making any attempts to manipulate the information. However, the internet was not concerned with public relations cycles. Individuals desired transparency. They desired identities. They desired action. In the interim, Malik and Ayana were seated at their residence. Both phones are inundated with messages, a few from acquaintances, others from numbers that they were unfamiliar with. Ayana presented her sibling with an item that elicited a shared chuckle. Despite all odds, is that your father on the news? Tell him to run for office or something. I am deceased. However, the subsequent challenges were more challenging. Why did you not simply leave? Nobody is obligated to provide you with a vehicle. Not everything is about race. He likely believed that you were neglecting your academic obligations. What does it matter if wealthy individuals are seeking sympathy at this time? Malik gazed at his screen, mandible clenched. Ayana gently touched his arm. Please refrain from reading that material. He refrained from responding. He continued to browse. The room was entered by their father, holding 2 glasses of tea. Charles instructed his audience to silence their mobile devices. For the time being, Malik hesitated. Finally he placed his phone face down on the table. Ayana pursued. Charles sat across from them, slightly leaning in. This was not requested by you two. However, there are instances in which life determines that your narrative is more significant than you. There was a frown from Ayana. However, we did not engage in any activities. We merely entered. I am aware, he replied. That is what renders this so authentic. Despite the fact that you executed every task correctly, an individual perceived you in a negative light. Malik gazed at the tabletop. Will this be the case indefinitely? Charles permitted the inquiry to remain in the vicinity for an extended period. No, he replied. However, you will encounter it once more. When you do, you determine the identity you wish to embody at that precise instance. Reporters continued to circulate outside the residence. Within, a force that was more potent than wrath was gaining traction. Consciousness and awareness persists. The sun sank lower behind Camelback Mountain, casting long shadows across the villages and backyard. Charles had not addressed the dealership for 2 days. 2 extended, tranquil days of public commotion, messages and headlines. However, it remained unchanged in this location, concealed by the hedges. Charles was situated at the barbecue, spinning salmon fillets at a leisurely pace. Malik sat at the patio table, his elbows resting on his legs, gazing out over the lawn. Ayana's visage was concealed beneath her hoodie as she leaned against the railing. Absence of censors. There are no inquiries. You know, it's just family, Charles stated without glancing up. I saved for 2 years to purchase my first car at the age of 16. 94 Toyota Corollas. The windows had to be manually rolled down due to the faded crimson color. Ayana briefly observed him. You stated that it lacked air conditioning, correct? None. Charles laughed. I was nearly consumed by the heat of Phoenix summer. However, I harbored affection for that automobile. Not because it was pleasant, rather because I earned it. Malik eventually turned his head. Have you ever been treated in a manner similar to ours? Charles nodded once. More times than I could count. I was pursued as I entered establishments. I attempted to obtain a loan from a bank, but I was met with ridicule. At one point I was denied service at a cafe in Tucson. I sat there with my code books on my lap and everything. I did not cause any disturbances. I simply departed. Malik inquired. However, why not respond? In the same way that you are currently doing. Charles flipped an additional fillet. Because at that time I did not believe that my voice was significant. I was under the impression that by maintaining a low profile, I could progress. He hesitated. However, I was mistaken. Quietly the griddle hissed. That is the issue, son. There is an abundance of time that you devote to enduring disrespect. You begin to ignore the sensation of being observed. I have never desired that for you. Alternatively, for your sister. Ayana took a seat next to her sibling. You certainly ensured that we were observed. Charles examined both of them. At present, mere visibility is inadequate. You must be prepared for the consequences that will ensue. The commendation, the critique, individuals who will admire you for your courage, and those who will harbor animosity toward you as a consequence. Malik gazed downward at his palms. I was not even interested in it becoming a reality. I merely desired to examine a vehicle. Charles acknowledged. I am aware. That is the reason it is so potent. You were not engaged in any form of performance. You were simply living your existence. And someone objected to the appearance of that. They contemplated that for a brief period. Charles expressed his admiration for his colleague, stating, I am immensely proud of you, both of you. You refrained from raising your voice. You did not attempt to establish any facts. You simply remained faithful to your inner self. Ayana shook her head. It did not appear to be courageous. It is not intended to, he stated. Bravery is generally reserved. It is simply a matter of refusing to compromise one's morality, in a world that is not conducive to that occasionally, is not. There was an extended period of silence in the yard. Subsequently, Ayana grinned. So, are we still in the process of searching for a vehicle? Charles smiled. I was under the impression that you would never inquire. Malik sat more upright. Excuse me, is this for real? Charles hurled a set of keys across the table. A gentle clink was heard as they landed in close proximity to Malik's hand. He instructed me to inspect the garage the following day. However, the automobile is not the primary concern. It pertains to the individual you develop while operating it. That is of greater importance than any engine. Ayana teased her sibling by leaning into him. It is imperative that you refrain from crashing it on the first day. Please, Malik replied. I am operating the vehicle as if it were composed of glass. Charles chuckled, and for the first time in days momentary burden began to diminish. Outrage is the conclusion of certain narratives. There are others who remain silent. However, this one concludes with a lesson. Occasionally the most effective approach to retaliation is to remain stationary, remain composed, sincere, etc. If this story has evoked any emotions in you, please share it and don't forget to subscribe, in order to access additional stories that challenge and connect, and they remind us of who we truly are.